Finding common ground. Top U.S. bishops meet with the president at the White House. Taking on ISIS. The Pentagon reveals details on a drone strike that may have killed the infamous Jihadi John. Staying steady. Pope Francis pushes ahead with Vatican reforms amid a flurry of scandals. A spirit of service. How Catholic volunteers are helping thousands of migrants flooding into Europe. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, November 13th, 2015. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Brian Patrick tonight. The president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference meets with President Obama in the Oval Office today. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz was joined by Washington, D.C.'s Cardinal Donald Worrell and the General Secretary for the bishops. Catherine Zeltner has more on that meeting from the White House tonight. Catherine?
Wyatt, today's meeting was a follow-up to Pope Francis's September visit. The bishops say it continues the goodwill from that papal trip, and the White House says it's a chance to discuss issues of common ground. But the bishops and the president don't always see eye to eye.
As the son of an immigrant family, I'm happy to be a guest in this country.
Less than 2 months after Pope Francis visited the White House, the head of the U.S. Catholic Church follows up on the Holy Father's mission. Today, Archbishop Kurtz, Monsignor Jenkins, and Cardinal Worrell met with President Obama in a closed meeting. Catholic Vice President Joe Biden was also present. The Obama administration lists care for refugees, an end to poverty, and protection of the environment as goals it shares with the Catholic Church. But when Pope Francis spoke next to President Obama, it was religious liberty he underlined.
As my brothers, the United States bishops have reminded us, all are called to be vigilant, precisely as good citizens, to preserve and defend that freedom from everything that would threaten or compromise it.
During his D.C. visit, the Holy Father met with Kentucky Judge Kim Davis and the Little Sisters of the Poor. Both say their religious liberty is under threat. The Supreme Court will soon hear the Little Sisters' case against Obamacare's birth control mandate. The Archdiocese of Washington, led by Cardinal Worrell, is also part of that case. Today's meeting was closed to the press, but it comes just days before the largest gathering of U.S. bishops. The bishops meet all next week in Baltimore for their annual fall assembly. I'll be reporting from there with more details. Wyatt?
Catherine Zeltner from the White House tonight. Catherine, thanks. The Vatican is no stranger to drama, intrigue, or scandal, but even by Vatican standards, this has been quite a month. Since Pope Francis returned from his visit to the United States in September, numerous reports have surfaced over Vatican reform and theological debates. This week, the Vatican issued a series of statements disputing reports left and right. They also confirmed 2 Italian journalists are now under investigation by Vatican judges for their involvement in the latest scandal over leaked documents. Joining us now from Rome is Alan Holdren with an update. Alan, how is the Holy Father holding up?
Well, Wyatt, despite these difficult situations that have come up, he seems steady and determined. He's got his regular schedule moving forward. Just this week, he was in Florence. He gave a sort of a mission statement to the Italian church. He said that he wants a church that shuns power, prestige, and money in favor of solidarity for the poor and the oppressed. This is his ongoing reform of consciences, in addition to the reform of this Vatican Curia, the administration here in the Vatican. One of his closest advisors told the press this week that the Pope is calm, he's collected, he's a man of God, a man of prayer, and he's not disappointed by these things.
It does sound consistent with Pope Francis. It is unusual for the Vatican and the Pope himself to comment on things like these, like leaked documents.
Yeah, it is. We hadn't heard anything like this recently. Usually the Vatican has sort of a policy not to comment on claims of leaked documents, but in this case they are being open about it. Father Lombardi from the Vatican press office said that they hadn't released so many details about the issues that have come into question through these leaks, but with the details having come out, he says it all shows that Pope Francis' reform is moving forward and that he commissioned the information that was leaked. Another Vatican cardinal who's a very close collaborator of the Pope, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, told the press, told Vatican Radio this week that there's a temptation to stay in the regular humdrum of the way things have always been. In the face of change, there is this temptation not to change, but he says we need to turn that into tools for reform.
Alan, the Pope is scheduled to travel to Africa later this month. What do you know about that trip?
Well, he's going to Kenya, to Uganda, and to the Central African Republic in about 2 weeks' time. The Central African Republic is conflict-torn. Just this week, French news reports said that the French soldiers that are trying to keep the peace there in the Central African Republic will not be providing security for the Pope's trip. So the UN and the Vatican are now in negotiations and talks to see how to provide for the Pope's security while he's there. The Pope actually, during one of his Angelus addresses recently, said that he hopes to go. I reached out to the Vatican press office to get a comment from them on whether or not this trip will move forward, and they said that there's a reason that this Central African Republic leg is the last one of the trip, and it's because if there's too much violence, if there's too much danger, they'll have to cut it off. Wyatt?
Well, I know security is going to be a big concern as we continue to follow his upcoming trip to Africa, and obviously Vatican reform is always an important topic as well. Alan Holdren, thanks so much for giving us a recap from Rome tonight.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Now to some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The Supreme Court is taking on its first abortion case in 8 years. It's a dispute over state regulation of abortion clinics. The justices say they will hear arguments over a Texas law that would leave about 10 abortion clinics open across the state. A decision should come by late June, 4 months before the presidential election. We'll have a little bit more later in the newscast. A U.S. drone strike on a vehicle may have killed the masked Islamic State fighter known as Jihadi John. A U.S. military spokesman says it's still early, but they're reasonably certain he is dead. Our Jason Calvi joins us with more. Jason?
Wyatt, Colonel Stephen Warren in Iraq calls Jihadi John a human animal, the face of ISIS who was used to recruit others to the group. British Prime Minister David Cameron says British intelligence agencies have been working around the clock to find the militant.
The masked man known as Jihadi John. The mysterious figure appeared in gruesome videos made by ISIS. The beheadings of 2 American journalists, British and American aid workers, a Japanese journalist, and a number of other hostages. The figure spoke English in a British accent.
So it's only right we continue to strike the necks of your people.
Western government officials later ID'd him as Muhammad Emwazi, a British citizen born in Kuwait, now thought to be dead.
U.S. officials are being very clear. They believe they got him with a drone strike against the vehicle he was in Raqqa, Syria, ISIS's capital, its self-declared capital, but they are not 100% sure. They are looking for confirmation.
ISIS is known for their propaganda videos put online. The image of Jihadi John was in some of them. Analysts describe him as grotesque, a man who liked torture. The Pentagon announced Thursday night that a U.S. airstrike targeted Emwazi. A senior U.S. official called it a mission of persistent surveillance, saying the military knew it was Emwazi when they fired.
And the Pentagon says U.S. coalition forces have killed a mid to upper-level ISIS fighter every 2 days since May. The parents of murdered journalist James Foley say the news brings them little comfort. They say there should have been as much effort to rescue hostages like their son as tracking down Jihadi John. Wyatt?
Jason Calvi, thanks very much for that report. Investigators in Lebanon are working to verify a claim that ISIS was behind twin suicide bombings in the capital. Locals gathered at the scene where 2 suicide bombs killed at least 43 people in Beirut Thursday. Residents, including the family of a victim who died in the attack, looked on as an ambulance arrived and soldiers guarded the scene of destruction. The explosions hit minutes apart in a Hezbollah stronghold during rush hour. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the blasts, which also wounded more than 200 people. The man who pulled off an elaborate escape from a New York State prison earlier this year has pleaded guilty to charges connected to the jailbreak. David Sweat pleaded guilty today to 2 counts of escape and 1 count of promoting prison contraband. He will be sentenced in February. Sweat is already serving a life sentence without parole on a murder conviction. He and inmate Richard Matt drilled their way out of the maximum security prison back in June. Sweat was shot and captured by law enforcement after more than 3 weeks on the run. Matt was shot and killed earlier. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump tells voters in Iowa anyone who supports his GOP rival Ben Carson is stupid. Trump went on a tirade Thursday night against the retired neurosurgeon who's neck and neck with the real estate mogul in recent polls. Trump says he can't understand why anyone would support Carson. Carson's business manager is firing back.
You know, it's so immature. It is so embarrassing. I feel so sorry for him. You know, when I spoke with Dr. Carson about this yesterday, asking how should we respond, you know, he was so sad by it. He said, pray for him.
Trump also criticized many of his other GOP rivals and Democrat Hillary Clinton. Coming up, as Europe faces its worst refugee crisis since World War II, Catholic groups provide short-term support. And faith-based organizations prepare to take their case to the Supreme Court over the HHS mandate. Today we celebrate the feast of St. Frances Xavier Cabrini. She founded the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart. She arrived in the U.S. from Italy in 1889 to work with immigrants. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. The International Organization for Migration says almost 800,000 people have arrived in Europe by sea already this year. That's nearly 4 times the amount that arrived in all of 2014. The Greek island of Lesbos in particular is dealing with a constant stream of migrants. One set of hands starts to wave. The team on land signals back. The volunteers have witnessed this countless times before, the frantic disembarkment brought on by the overwhelming emotions of having survived. Just over 24 hours ago, 18 people drowned in these waters. A mother cradles her child, who is handed over to medics, relief etched on her face. It is hardest on the little ones, wrapped quickly to keep them warm. This group is from Afghanistan. Greek lifeguard volunteers keep their eyes peeled on the horizon as more arrive. These refugees fleeing war-torn Syria. Others wait for ferries to the mainland. Exhausted children sleep anywhere. 2-year-old Ali is in his favorite Tigger outfit, the only thing brought to remind him of home. All his toys were left behind. Ali is from Jarablos. His uncle, the family says, was one of the first 5 rebel fighters beheaded by ISIS when they took over, before Ali was even born. We had to leave, his mother says. It's only now that I was able to save the money, his father adds. Both want to remain unidentified. Their own parents are still living under ISIS. The flood of refugees has not decreased with the coming of winter, and no crackdown on smuggling, no fences put up by European nations is going to stop the most desperate of peoples. Each family, each person has a heartbreaking story of leaving everything behind, knowing that their children may never see their homeland in their lifetimes. On the front lines of the crisis are volunteers, many from Catholic organizations helping the migrants. Nikos Vousinos is a volunteer with Caritas Athens. Nikos, what is Caritas doing to help migrants arriving in Greece?
At this moment, we receive every day a lot of people. We are trying to inform them of their rights and what possibilities they have, because they come completely ignorant. And they are completely exploited by the traffickers. So we are trying to contradict this thing and then give them a first aid help.
And how do you do that? Is it food? Is it clothes? What do you provide?
We first of all, we go in and take them with us from the square they usually stay, waiting for the traffickers to take them off to the frontiers. And in the office, we just give them consultation with the social workers, food distribution, clothes, shoes, sanitary bags, whatever. I mean, and for the kids, because they have a lot of babies, diapers, milk, and food.
When those migrants arrive, what state are they in? Describe how they look.
They are completely, let's say, tired, sick most of the time, so we're trying to find doctors to send them, afraid, not knowing where they are, what they will do, paying a lot of money, unbelievable. The exploitation of these people is terrible. We are going, let's say, several times in the harbor to meet them as they come out of the ship. And they are like driven like a flock to the smugglers, completely.
Right, and as you say, there's a lot of money involved here. Right now, EU leaders are discussing how to cope with the crisis. How does Caritas deal with the cost of helping, thousands of migrants?
Fortunately, with Caritas, people in Greece, they are very sensitive, especially with the crisis. They've become even more sensitive, and they are helping us. And also, we get a lot of help from Caritas, other Caritas in Europe. And recently also we get from Caritas, from Catholic Relief Service in the States.
And I know you guys have been receiving hundreds of migrants per day. Lots of those are children as well.
5,000 to 7,000 every day in the islands, and then with a ship, a lot every morning.
Okay. Well, Nikos, we want to let you know that EWTN and all of our viewers note that our prayers are with you. We thank you so much for the work that you do. And thank you for talking with us today, Nikos Voussinios with Caritas Athens.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thomas Aquinas College in California will battle the HHS contraceptive mandate at the Supreme Court early next year. The High Court will hear the school's case next March. College President Michael McLean tells us the government's mandate is unwarranted and unlawful.
This is one of the defining life issues of our time, and since we are committed to introducing our students to the best of Catholic truth, and because we believe that truth really matters, we felt it was important for us to stand against the mandate and do our best to prevail in the battle with the U.S. government.
Thomas Aquinas College will join the Little Sisters of the Poor, Priests for Life, and other Catholic and Christian colleges. The Supreme Court is combining 7 cases into one. Sarah Torrey is a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, where she works on issues like religious liberty, marriage, and family. Sarah, the Supreme Court decided a similar case in the summer of last year. There was Burwell versus Hobby Lobby. Can you remind us what the court decided in that case and how that decision could impact these cases?
Sure. So last year, the Supreme Court ruled against the HHS mandate as it's applied to family businesses like Hobby Lobby that was run by the Green family. There, the court found that the government couldn't coerce these family businesses to violate their beliefs under threat of devastating penalties. We're talking $100 per employee per day for not complying with this mandate, especially when the government could have found other ways to meet its policy goals without hijacking employers' health plan and trampling on religious freedom. So we're hopeful that they'll find the same for the Little Sisters of the Poor and uphold religious freedom in these cases as well.
And so how do you think that decision could potentially impact these cases?
So certainly it'll be the same basic legal question in Hobby Lobby as in Little Sisters of the Poor. It's basically whether or not this mandate, as applied to nonprofits, violates the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which is a common sense law that says government can't substantially burden someone's free exercise of religion unless the government has a compelling interest to do so and does so the least restrictive way possible. In Hobby Lobby, the court found that the government had not met that high bar, and they're unlikely to do so, or I assume they won't do so in the Little Sisters case either.
You know, the government makes a different argument. They say they provide, a so-called accommodation in the law. What's the problem with this accommodation, as they call it? Exactly. It's a so-called accommodation that the Obama administration has provided. It's really just a complicated way of forcing the Little Sisters to comply with the mandate. Basically what it says is that the Little Sisters have to sign documents that trigger the same coverage of abortion-inducing drugs and devices, contraception, sterilization in their health plan, basically authorizing the government to use their health plan to provide these drugs and services. The Little Sisters and other nonprofits believe that this still makes them morally complicit in providing these objectionable services. So in your view, therefore, is this mandate the only way the government could provide free contraceptives to women? Certainly not, and this is what the court noted in Hobby Lobby, that there are plenty of other ways for the government to do this, either providing these drugs and devices directly to women who wanted them, providing other means of finding insurance coverage for this, without hijacking employers' health plans, trampling on religious freedom, and threatening them with really crippling fines. Okay, well, certainly these 7 cases are really important. Let me switch gears here to the Texas case, which we mentioned earlier in the newscast. We heard the Supreme Court will hear a dispute over the regulations of abortion clinics. This is a big case, isn't it? Absolutely. This will be one of the bigger abortion policy cases the court has taken over, certainly in the near future.
this is a really important case where part of a Texas law that places common sense regulations on abortion clinics, making sure that they're meeting the same health and safety standards as other outpatient facilities, having admitting privileges at hospitals, really common sense regulations that protect women's health and safety. And hopefully the court will find that Texas can place these regulations on the abortion industry and uphold women's safety.
Like you say, it's a very important case that's coming up, and obviously we'll continue to follow it as well. Sarah Torrey with the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Queen Elizabeth II of Britain welcomes Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Buckingham Palace. The Queen showed him some of the palace's artifacts. Modi is on the second day of his high-profile visit to the UK. He's the first Indian Prime Minister to visit the country in almost 10 years. Meanwhile, Pope Francis sends a message to India's National Eucharistic Congress taking place in Mumbai this weekend.
The Eucharistic Congress is God's gift, not just for the Christians of India, but for the entire population of our country.
The Holy Father calls India culturally diverse but spiritually rich. A Eucharistic Congress is a gathering of clergy and lay people to bear witness to the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Up next, a historic moment in Myanmar as a pro-democracy party wins control of parliament. Plus, a unique tradition honoring Our Lady of Guadalupe is making its way across America. U.S. Marines receiving communion on Iwo Jima during World War II. As we honor our veterans this week, we give thanks to God for the gift of freedom and democracy. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Not every nation is so lucky. For more than half a century, Myanmar has lived under military rule, but that is about to change. Results released today show the opposition party securing a historic majority in Myanmar's parliament. It's been 5 years since its leader was released from house arrest. Though questions remain over how the political landscape will evolve, many in the nation are hopeful this is the beginning of a peaceful transition to democracy. Priscilla Clapp is a senior advisor to the U.S. Institute of Peace and the Asia Society and a former diplomat in Burma. Priscilla, what has Myanmar's political landscape been in recent years?
Well, it spent 50 years under military rule, and 5 years ago the military decided that they would start moving back gradually into civilian government that they called disciplined democracy. The discipline was to be provided by the military. And they did that by retiring their military leadership into political positions. And they all ran for parliament. So the first parliament that's just ending now after 5 years was heavily ex-military. Lots of old generals and all of the ministers were ex-military generals. So you had a very heavy military overlay during that 5 years. The NLD was brought into that government, but it was a very minor party. Minor minority party in the parliament. And then this was to be the second 5 years, and they thought that the NLD, they knew the NLD was going to win a lot, but they didn't think it would be this much. They thought the government party would also win. They knew it would lose, but they thought it would have a better showing than it has had, and that this 5 years would be a collective government, between the NLD and the government party, which was heavily ex-military. But they're now a spent force, and the NLD won an overwhelming majority in the parliament.
So noting that history of the past 5 years and how that transition to power has been happening, tell me about the significance of this particular election.
Well, the significance is the size of the NLD win means that the NLD controls the parliament. It will have a vast majority of the seats. I think it's probably, it's up to 70-something% now, but I think it's going into the 80s. So that gives them, the parliament elects the president by a majority vote. So the NLD will determine the next president plus one of the vice presidents. That means that the NLD will then name all of the ministers, and they will control a lot of the executive branch, but they will manage the executive branch in partnership with the military, because the military, in the way they wrote the Constitution, has preserved certain privileges for itself. It controls certain ministries that have to do with security. It has 25% of the seats in the parliament, and they can block any attempt by the Parliament to amend the Constitution if they choose to. So, so any changes to that Constitution will have to be negotiated with the military.
It's interesting. I know it's a complicated issue for many of our viewers to try to break down and understand Myanmar and what's been happening there, but we really appreciate your being here and at least a little bit of insight into this. Priscilla Clapp, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Finally tonight, we are now 1 month away from the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. In preparation, the Knights of Columbus continue a unique tradition of carrying roses across North America. 6 silver roses pass from church to church in Canada and the U.S. The tradition began in the 60s as a way to honor Our Lady of Guadalupe, the patroness of the Americas. The roses reaffirm the Knights' devotion to Mary and their commitment to the culture of life. One flower that left Canada in April is now passing through a church in Maryland.
I feel it quite an honor to be able to have it passed on to me, and then I can pass it on to the next council. I feel like I've been carrying part of the Olympic torch for a few feet.
That rose will end its journey in the nation's capital, another one in Connecticut. The other 4 roses will end up at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Monterrey, Mexico on her feast day. We thank you for watching our newscast tonight. Remember that you can follow us anytime on Facebook and Twitter and watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Good night and God bless.